Good morning. I would like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, April 25th, 2024. For those of you watching on YouTube, you might see that our in-person audience is a little younger and rowdier than usual. Today is Take Your Child to Work Day at the PSC, so we have a lot of special guests with us in the audience, and so I just want to give a special welcome to them. Thank you for coming to watch us, guys. So now I'm going to ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, April 18th, 2024, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, April 18, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 10, the suggested minute associated with agenda item 11, approving the revised list of delegated items as proposed, or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 12, agreeing to dismiss the complaint by joint execution of a consent agreement between the Commission and Whiteco LLC, and accepting the proposed consent agreement as drafted, which requires Whiteco LLC to pay a forfeiture of $3,250 and a $325 surcharge to Diggers Hotline.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 9 and 10.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move we approve the updated delegated commissioner assignments and delegation chart associated with agenda item 11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Sorry, Commissioner Hawkins. And I move we approve associated with agenda item 12, dismissing the complaint by joint execution of a consent agreement and accepting the proposed agreement as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for those, and thank you to you both for taking on the delegated items that were included in item 11. So that brings us to agenda item 13, which includes two dockets, 9716 FG 2023 and 9717 FG 2023, which are the Inflation Reduction Act Home Energy Rebate Programs. Commissioner Nieto is taking the lead on this one as the delegated commissioner on these issues, and we really appreciate all the hard work you put into this. This is a very important program with a lot of important decision items, so thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing you lead our discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Strand. So as by way of background, in 2022, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA or IRA, into law. And the law includes $391 billion to support clean energy and address climate change nationally. This law in specific authorizes two large-scale rebate programs, and those programs are number one, HOMES, which is a home energy efficiency program, and number two, a program called HERE, which is a home electrification and appliance rebate program. So these programs allocated specific dollars to every state energy office in the United States. And our state energy office here at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin was allocated an amount of $74.9 million for the HOMES program and $74.47 million for the HERE program. So again, these are large-scale programs. States have until 2031 to expend the funds under these programs. And the United States Department of Energy has provided states with detailed information on the program requirements and specific guidance on how to implement the programs. So what we're doing here today is we're deciding essentially whether and in what regard we need to customize the DOE essentially template program to fit Wisconsin's needs and to also align with our own administrative resources and capabilities and processes. Again, these are large-scale energy efficiency and electrification programs that, even as they're currently designed in the model version by DOE, they will bring economic benefits to our state. They will bring bill savings to customers. They are going to advance new technologies and develop markets nationally, and they will result in carbon reduction in our country and in our state as well. So these are very exciting programs to be able to be talking about rolling out in Wisconsin here. The IRA, as written, does a good job targeting these programs and focusing on low to middle income people. I think as just an initial general statement, I would say I believe there is some room to make some modifications to our state's program to greater benefit those who have experienced barriers to energy efficiency and electrification. I do think also we should take a balanced approach. We want to also ensure, as many commenters said, simplicity, a streamlined experience for customers. We want national consistency as well for national vendors and participants in the program. So a lot of considerations here in our approach to tailoring our application to be finalized and submitted to DOE. But overall, again, individuals are going to see direct benefits, and our entire state will see the indirect benefits to our economy and to our environment. Other than that, I'll say just in terms of process and the steps, we, in March of 2023, went through the process to receive administrative funds for this program. So states could receive administrative funds in advance. And we have had access to those, and we've been able to work with Aptum as the program administrator to start designing the program and performing outreach, gathering input across the state on how the program should be designed. So that work has already been occurring. The Aptum team and commission staff did a variety of stakeholder and engagement events across the state. And then commission staff prepared a memo, and that's the memo that we're discussing today. That memo went out for comment, and we received over 70 public comments that are helping inform our decisions today. After we make the decisions, and these are, again, high-level decisions about the direction of the program, then we still have more steps. We submit the actual application to DOE. We work with DOE through the application process, curing, making any edits, and then we get to the actual implementation of the details of the program. I'd just like to take a moment here to thank our staff for their continued, very thorough, in-depth work on these programs, as well as the focus on energy, Aptum staff, trade allies, all of the stakeholders, commenters, and members of the public whose input has really been helpful in reviewing the decisions we have to make today. And I will turn it over to my colleagues for any opening remarks that they have.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Nieto. That was a very helpful overview and background of the programs and the process that really helped put some good context in place for us. I'll just say a couple things that'll mostly echo everything that you said. I think it probably goes without saying, but there are a lot of eyes on this program. They're very important, and we were fortunate to have the U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm come to Wisconsin to join Governor Evers to talk about these programs. Additionally, our team at the PSC has been in part of a Department of Energy cohort, which helped us kind of move more quickly through the development process. And hopefully, based on our actions today, we'll be able to kind of hit the ground running in terms of deployment. I'm also excited to see that all of the hard work that Commissioner Nieto talked about culminate in what's before us today, so we can really start to make these important program design decisions. And that the listening sessions and the public comments did really help. They brought a lot of insight and have impacted how I'm going to view these decisions that are before us. And then I especially want to echo your thanks to the team. This is a lot of work. They put in long hours. There's very technical pieces. They got kind of last minute different information from DOE to make, and they were really careful about including that and making sure that we're aware of those answers from DOE the week of us making a decision to get us to where we are. And I think, like you said, these programs do offer an opportunity for people in our state to save money and reduce their energy usage. And so I hope that we can reach as many households as possible, as quickly as possible, especially, like you said, to those who need these rebates the most. So I think that's it for that, but thank you.
Thank you, Chair Strand.
First of all, I agree with both of you on the importance of these programs and with the potential to customize and target those that stand to benefit the most from them. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation on that. I also just want to point out how fortunate we are to be in a state with a lot of the infrastructure, administrative infrastructure in place to be able to stand up these programs relatively quickly. I know I've worked with a lot of other state energy offices across the country that aren't so closely connected with their commissions and are really having to create that infrastructure from scratch and on a quick timeline. And we have great teams in place to stand this up in a very rapid pace. And so I'm really excited to be in a state like Wisconsin that can take these DOE funds and get them out to the people that need them as quickly as possible. And as part of that, I agree with what Commissioner Nieto raised, the importance of simplicity and clarity on these programs. And so looking forward to the discussion on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. With that, we will take a brief pause before getting into the decisions and allow our special guests to move on to their next agenda item here. All right. Thank you for that brief pause, and I think our guests have moved on to their next part of their day. And now we're ready to really discuss the specific decisions that we have before us with regard to this application. I would just say again, DOE has essentially provided states with guidance and almost a template or a model program that states can use. And DOE has said, in many of these areas of the program, you can modify as a state your application and tailor it to your state in specific ways. So that's really what we're looking at here. Are those areas of flexibility and whether or not those are appropriate for Wisconsin. I will say that of those areas, we do have 16 decision points, I believe, before us today. So there are quite a few areas to get through. I have created a handout, and it's not because I'm really proposing anything that's really customized here. It's more because we have 16 decision points to look at. And I'd like to just share that with both of you, and I'm using it myself as a guide to walk through and keep track of where we're at. I think to the point made by staff in some of our materials, there are a few of these decisions that impact other decisions and are tied in. So it's a little bit easier for me to see everything at a glance and keep track of where we're at. I believe that's circulating right now.
And I'll just note quickly for those watching along in the on the stream, this handout should be available on the Commission's event page shortly or currently.
Great. Again, this handout is listing the decision points that we have in front of us, but as we would usually do, I think we can still take our discussion point by point. Because we do have quite a bit to get through, I don't plan to provide really extensive background with each decision point here, but I think we can walk through these and see where we align and discuss and take it from there. Our first few decisions have to do with the HERE program. And again, this program provides rebates for specified appliance upgrades and then upgrades to complement the appliances. So Energy Star, electrification, appliance upgrades, and then complementary energy efficiency upgrades such as insulation, air sealing, ventilation. This particular program is income qualified fully, so there is a cap at 150% of the area median income, and rebate levels differ depending on whether a household is income qualified up to 80% AMI or 150% AMI. So I will just mention that by way of background. But getting into our first decision point here, we have to decide whether we would offer all rebates for all technologies that the IRA has identified as eligible. We're not required to, but we may. And under this decision point, I would say again to our point of simplicity, streamlining, creating consistency in the national marketplace, I would select alternative 1 and offer rebates for all upgrades eligible. Chair Strand?
I'm at alternative 1 on this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm at alternative 1 as well.
Thank you. And then moving along to households eligible for, the HERE rebate amounts. Again, there are specific rebate amounts set. So households below 80% AMI can earn a rebate of up to 100% on project costs up to $14,000. And then households between 80 and 150% AMI can earn rebates of 50% of project costs up to $14,000. So states do have the flexibility to set HERE program rebate amounts for each individual upgrade to align with program priorities, and they can go up to the maximum. I'm going to say again, for the same reasons under the first decision we talked about in terms of consistency, streamlining, and predictability, I would select alternative 1 and offer the maximum rebates for all eligible upgrades.
I'm at alternative 1 for this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alternative 1.
Great, thank you. Moving on to households eligible for HERE heat pump rebates. There was some good analysis and discussion in the memo around offering heat pump rebates for space heating and cooling costs, or space heating and cooling in homes. There is some discussion about whether to offer heat pumps for this purpose for all households. So that would be households that have existing propane furnaces, existing electric resistance heating, existing natural gas furnaces, as well as new construction, single home and multifamily. Or do we wish to somehow limit the types of households who may receive this technology? I was at Alt 1 for this one. I recognize some of the discussion and commentary around natural gas furnace customers switching to an electric heat pump may experience bill increases depending on the cost of natural gas as a commodity at the time and the season and that kind of thing. And I will just say that this program is required to provide a bill impact analysis to customers before they move forward with the technology. So if you are exploring switching to a heat pump in that scenario, you would get a specific bill analysis showing that there may be potential for your bill to go up. That has to happen before moving forward. So I think allowing customers who do have a potential for a bill to go down and decrease to take advantage of that where that happens, I was comfortable with that. I also saw opportunities in the new construction market as well, so I was at Alt 1.
Alternative 1 for the reasons you stated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Completely agree, alternative 1.
Thank you. And then moving on to here contractor and eligible entity bonus amounts. The memo that we have from staff has a table 4, that essentially shows staff working with Aptum have proposed to take all of DOE's maximum bonus incentives for contractors with one exception. The exception is with the installation of electric heat pumps for space heating and cooling per dwelling unit, ducted versus unducted. The planning team proposed to set an equal bonus for both of those types of activities, and that's a matter of administrative simplicity for the program administrator. I was at Alt 1 for this one and accepting Table 4.
I was in the same spot, Alt 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alternative 1 as well.
Thank you. The next set of decisions here, we'll get into the homes program. So we're switching gear. The homes program is the whole home energy efficiency program. The primary objective of this program is to save energy. There are a couple of potential pathways we'll discuss regarding whether the program models energy savings or measures energy savings. This program is not specifically capped at 150% of area median income. It is, as designed by DOE, open to all households, but low-income households are eligible to receive higher rebate amounts for projects completed under this program. So our first decision is whether we would like to adopt a modeled or measured program delivery model. So I would say under this one, there was a lot of good analysis and discussion about using the modeled program path or the measured program path. Right now, I'm at modeled for a couple of reasons. Our program administrator and staff team are able to implement the modeled path right now. If we were to implement the measured, there would be a delay in the rolling out of our application and program in order to do all the groundwork necessary to get to measured. That said, staff and Aptum have expressed in our materials here interest in investigating further the measured path and whether that's something we could additionally implement by 2025, which I was pleased to hear. We're still exploring that and what that might look like and require. So I would say alternative 1, and I'd look forward to hearing back on what the results of that investigation are.
I was at alternative 1 for this one as well. I think model just gives us the best opportunity to use what we know how to do and to get that going quickly. So alternative 1 on this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I went back and forth on this one. I think there's a really good opportunity to use the funds to expand our capabilities in the future, and I agree, I don't want to hold that up the implementation in the near term to do that. I think it's really important that we take the opportunity to pursue the measured approach. I think there's some really good upsides there. So, in the future, like 2025, like you mentioned, Commissioner Nieto, I think that's something we really should encourage OEI to investigate with the team. And so I'm at alternative 1 as well, and I'm just wondering if there's any sort of follow-up that we have to do, or you as the delegated commissioner to oversee that, or what you might expect to be those next steps. And that's just a curiosity of mine, but I agree with your urgency, but I think the measured approach has some upsides that I hope we can get to sometime soon.
Those are great comments, Commissioner Hawkins, and I agree with everything you're saying. I would say good question on moving forward. A little bit of that question gets to delegation, like you said. I think there are some areas later in this memo where we'll talk about delegation of more minor cures in the application and steps. And what we're talking about here, implementing a measured approach, that's more of a major policy decision, obviously why we're talking about it today. So that is something I would envision coming back to the full commission, and something that I also agree with you, I'd like to work with the team on as delegated commissioner to get to that point.
That sounds great to me.
Great, thank you. The next decision in the homes program is on the rebate amounts and targeting the rebate amounts by household income, which the program already does, but the program does give flexibility to increase rebate amounts for low and moderate income households. And this is one area that DOE is not only saying a state may do this, but DOE is encouraging states to do this, not requiring, but encouraging. And I think in this area, based on DOE's encouragement, based on the public comments we received and commission staff's analysis, I was at alternative 2, subalternative A here. So I would propose in our application to increase our rebate cap to go up to 100% of project costs for low-income customers, as described in our memo here. I would say as well, in both of these programs, so whether it's the homes program or the HERE program, that up to 100% of project costs, we know based on the estimated costs of these projects and what the eligible components are, that it's going to be very difficult even under these scenarios that a customer would get to 100%. So even under this scenario, we'd still be requiring customers who are essentially at the poverty level to come up with some sort of upfront payment in many cases. I do think it's important to maximize our flexibility for those customers in this particular area. Chair Strand?
Thank you. I am also at alternative 2, subalt A on this one. To say a couple things. Again, it echoes what you said, but I think what we're really looking at here at a very basic level is the lower your income is, the higher your rebate amounts will be. And like you said, I think upfront costs in any programs like these can really amount to a barrier to entry because, again, you are paying a lot of money upfront. And for some of our lower income households in Wisconsin, that's just not something that they're in a position to do. We do already have some existing programs that do require those upfront costs. And so I think this structuring the program in this way, especially given that we have the flexibility and the guidance from the DOE, really helps us target those who need it the most, kind of like I said earlier. And hopefully they'll have these improvements that they can make through these rebates will hopefully have a really big impact on their ability to reduce their energy usage and therefore their energy burden. I thought there was really strong public participation throughout the comments process on this. And so while there wasn't always consensus, it did seem like a lot of our public participants were strongly supportive of increasing those rebate caps for low-income households in Wisconsin. So all of those things, again, we're in the heat of agreement, led me to Alt 2 sub A. But I think this is a really important thing that we can do to help. Sometimes we don't have a lot of tools to help. And this is one of those. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I completely agree with Chair Strand. Alt 2 sub A for me as well.
Great. Thank you. And moving on to homes program rebate amounts for households earning more than 150% of AMI. This is an area where DOE has said states can reduce rebate amounts for households earning more than 150% of AMI. It is not required. This is not a piece that is specifically encouraged, but it is an option. To me, I am in favor of balancing the program to make sure that there is broad availability. And I did not see homes envisioned initially as a simply LMI-specific program in the same manner that HERE was. So I was at Alt 1 for this and going with the DOE initially recommended levels.
Initially, I was at Alt 2 sub A for this one, and I'll talk very quickly about that. But I don't have a problem with Alt 1. I'll just lead with that. Part of the reason that I was at Alt 2 Sub A initially, I think, again, to kind of summarize this in a very basic level, the better off you are, the lower your rebate amount will be, because in theory, you'll need that rebate money less in order to engage in this program and complete some of these projects. I think higher income households are better positioned to afford these upgrades in general without a rebate. They also can take advantage of tax credits and access credit that might not be available to some of our low to median income households. And I think that establishing lower rebates, this was a comment from the decision matrix that our team put together for us, but lowering rebates for households only earning more than 150% more than AMI could also then extend the reach of homes. By lowering those rebates, we'd have more money left over that would allow us to serve, in theory, more households, because those lower amounts would mean that we had extra dollars to kind of extend our reach further. Again, though, I don't have a huge problem with Alt 1. I think it's more important here that we're accounting for what we can do for the low-income households rather than like putting the 150% and higher in the back of the line, you know? So I think it works to your point about kind of the interplay of the decision items. Just because we decided what we did on the previous decision doesn't really hamstring us on this one. So I can be flexible on this one, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of kind of why I was initially at Alt 2 Sub A.
That all makes sense too. Thank you, Chair Strand. And Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I was at Alt 2 Sub A as well, and thought about trying to extend I really thought about the likelihood of the upgrades happening in the first place for the higher income individuals likely needing less of an incentive to make some of these projects move forward anyhow. And so, and I think it creates some alignment with the HERE program, because there is that break in the income structure already. And so, when thinking through the consistency and how these fit together, I don't see this as being inconsistent by making this distinction. I am flexible, I guess. I do have a concern potentially that if we leave it at the recommended amount, that too much of the funds would get eaten up. So I don't know, Commissioner Nieto, if you have any thoughts on if the staggering would, I know there's like a focus early on for low income, if that would address that fear, I guess, or if you have any other additional thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them.
Yep, these are helpful comments from both of you, and really similar to a lot of what I was thinking. And this wasn't a super obvious decision point for me. I think there were some commenters, I think, making a really good point about by decreasing the rebates in this category, then you're adding additional tiers and layers and complexity. So kind of going to the simplicity we talked about. But then to your point, Commissioner Hawkins, it's aligning it more with HERE. So then you're creating more simplicity. And then you have to kind of take into consideration, are we setting aside budget allocations specifically for low-income customers and avoiding the kind of eating up the funds scenario, or are we not? So we have some interrelated decisions here too. All of that is to say this is an item that I also am open on, just depending on where we go with some of the other decision points. How would you feel about putting a pin in this one, seeing where we go with everything else and how it comes together as a package?
I think that makes a ton of sense. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
I agree, because I think depending on how one of these later ones goes, that would help out for sure.
Yep.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And then we have, the next decision is on program eligibility. And that is a decision that states have the discretion to narrow eligibility for these programs based on state priorities and based on income. On this one, I was at Alt 2, take no action. This is one that I felt more strongly about. I think staff and Aptum did a good job researching and investigating ways we could limit eligibility that could be feasible and could be helpful to the program. And there was a discussion of essentially limiting eligibility during the first tranche of funding we'll receive. only to the LMI customers, and then once we receive the second tranche of funding and unlock that, opening up the eligibility to customers at all income levels. To me, that model is too complex and potentially too confusing to customers and to the marketplace to kind of change eligibility in the middle of a program being active, and then have that change be predicated upon us unlocking a second tranche of funding, which isn't at a date certain. It's once we get our 5% of our total funding spent for low-income customers. So there was just a little bit too much complexity there for me. I would not limit eligibility here. Chair Strand?
This is another one that I struggled with and was at alternative one. So I think I'm going to have Commissioner Hawkins talk a little bit about his position on this one and then talk through it. Some of the things that I was considering in making a decision on this one was that limiting eligibility to those households earning less than during the first phase would allow us to kind of prioritize distributing the funds to those low and moderate income households earlier in the program's life, and that eventually, based on how much money we have available, that we should be able to reach as many households as possible, but that those who don't have access to some of these other opportunities should probably be prioritized or be first in line. And that, again, it's just the first phase, so people who have more ability to afford some of these things can just wait a little bit longer and be kind of second or third in line, depending on how things are unfolding. But I do agree, in general, I think it's important to try to keep things streamlined and simple, especially because these are new programs, and I think initially there are just going to be some challenges due to the newness and unfamiliar nature of it that might kind of slow things down initially. So I want to keep an open mind on this one as well. But Commissioner Hawkins, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Strand. I was at alternative one as well, and I'm curious, given the updated guidance from last week from DOE about the ability to entirely target homes below a certain threshold, if we wanted to go that approach, and then that keeps the simplicity instead of the timing. If you know, I think it says now we can choose below 80 or below 150, and I would think targeting below 150 AMI forever, and that would, you know, get rid of some of that confusion of opening up later. So, you know, I was in agreement with a lot of the commenters on alternative one, and then recently with that change of the ability to limit for the life, given the updated DOE guidance, that's something that I was open to. So that's where I'm at right now. Again, flexible, but that was my initial thinking.
Thank you both, and that is a good mention too about DOE's recent updated guidance saying that this homes program can also, like here, be fully limited based on income eligibility at a state's discretion. I think the specific kind of alternative that was teed up before us about shifting after the first tranche is something that I still feel pretty strongly about, just more in terms of program administration and not in terms of the how do we target the populations who are in most need and have the most barriers to these funds. So I'm wondering if there's another approach to do that, and maybe something we can you know, either discuss here or circle back to, but I think we have some opportunities under, for instance, our alternatives about reserving proportions of these dollars for LMI households. And I think at every tranche and every level, it accelerates the deployment at the upfront, to Chair Strand's point, of the funding. So those are some tools as well. And to Commissioner Hawkins' suggestion, discussing limiting eligibility for the program altogether, that's not a direction I necessarily envisioned going. I like the direction of targeting funds, ensuring upfront that the customers who need the assistance the most have reserved amounts and are receiving that. I do also see some of the more market and technological adoption benefits of having all households participate and households who are able to rapidly enroll in the program and jump in. So those are just some thoughts. I'll open it up to my colleagues to see if you'd prefer to circle back to this one or if you'd like to vote here right now. Chair Strand?
I think it probably makes sense to circle back, especially what you said about some of the upcoming decisions and carving out, depending on where we all are on those. So I think it makes the most sense to come back to 38 like we're going to do with 34. Sorry, I'm talking page numbers now. But I think you both have raised important points, especially as it relates to deployment and implementation. I do really worry that if it's kind of a first come, first served situation, that the people that need it the most are going to have a harder time accessing these things. But if you guys are good, let's just set this one aside as well and then move on to the other ones, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay with me, and I'll just put out there ahead of time that I think where Chair Strand and I were on the lowered rebate amounts paired with set-asides for the overall budget could be helpful, and on this one, get me to 2 and allowing those higher income levels to participate, but in a restricted way where they'd run out of funds basically at some point. And so that would get to some of your need for consistency, and I think that does have benefit in the marketplace. So reaching different segments. So I'm just putting that out there for when we do circle back.
Yeah, I think super quickly that could assuage maybe, I don't want to speak for you, but some of our fears about what's left over.
Exactly.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
You okay with?
And I think that's a great idea, too. I think that could get me to the exact same spot that you two are at, as kind of looking at it as an overall package and just avoiding that midstream shift of program eligibility. Moving on to the next decision point here. This is connected directly with what we're talking about, and I think kind of what we've been waiting to talk about in order to decide some of these other things. The HOMES program low-income budget allocation. With this program and with the dollar amount that we have for homes, DOE provided us with a minimum budget allocation, a minimum percentage of the funds that had to be allocated and reserved for low-income customers. Here, I would be at alternative 2, and I would reserve a greater proportion of our funding for low-income households than the minimum requirements, and I would be at sub-alt A, reserving 60%. And again, to some of that discussion of not having all of the funds too quickly be eaten up by households who have more ability to afford these programs, and just making sure there's a little bit of a stronger reserve portion there. Chair Strand?
Thank you. So I was at alternative 2 on this one as well, and was happy that we had some flexibility here, because this is something that I could be flexible on regarding the percentage. I think I was actually comfortable with anything between 50 and 70, given kind of, again, the options that are available to us in the subalts, and just talking through this with our program staff. Yeah, I think 60% makes sense. It's a nice kind of, one way that we were thinking about this was pie. And that it feels like that's a good number, but it's also like within that 70% ceiling that we want to make sure that is still kind of, again, implementable and deployable. But we do have some good options here, so I'm curious to hear what Commissioner Hawkins thinks.
Thank you both. I was at Alt 2, and originally I was at Sub-Alt B, the 70%, and that was, and I know that was the ceiling that was identified, so I'd be interested if there was any concerns from my colleagues on that implementability, or how easy it could be implemented with that 70% threshold. But I was thinking, paired with the lower caps for the higher income, that it would still enable more in that range, just receiving less, for each project. And so I thought either one of these would probably achieve that. So definitely agree, it should be a higher percentage, 60 or 70. I'm flexible, I'd originally been at 70, but I'd be fine with 60 if you're both okay there as well.
Thank you both. I think I agree with the points you're both making and had thought about some of these higher percentages as well. I do think taken together with lowering the over 150% amounts, 60% is where I'd be comfortable at. To the point you make, Commissioner Hawkins, about implementability. I had a few concerns about that 70% ceiling and the feasibility of implementing that and reaching the targets we need to be made. And I think I also had some additional concerns about getting to that 70% and then the 30% remaining, if that does include households over 150%. There's a lot of a squeeze on that moderate income segment and their band and percentage, which again, I think lowering those dollar amounts for the over 150% addresses. So taken together, I feel like the 60% reserve and then the lowering the incentive amounts on the over 150% income kind of creates those three bands that I was a little concerned about reserving space for in the LMI.
Yes, I agree. I think you articulated that really well. I think you both have done an excellent job of considering the interplay of these kind of middle group decision items that we're considering and how working together, you can kind of get to where you want to be on those program design decisions. It sounds like I think we can probably agree at 60. I think that's a good solid number and it's definitely above the 50, but below the 70. And I don't like to always think like, hey, let's split the difference. But here I think it does make sense. And I do think considering where it sounds like we may be going on those two other earlier decisions, that this could help with that kind of package overall big picture on our intent regarding rebate amounts, income eligibility, and then percentages of kind of set-asides, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. With 2 sub A, I think that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Same here.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
sounds great, thank you.
Great. And then we're going to the next decision point. Now, this is flipping again to the HERE program, which is the LMI qualified program. The question is whether to reserve a higher percentage for low-income households within this particular program. I was at Alt 1 in this decision point, essentially because we're already within a fully income qualified program, having essentially a 50-50 split between the income buckets. It made me feel comfortable in terms of our ability to implement that and reach those targets. I think this program is the electrification program, so it's offering some of those appliances like heat pumps and other appliances that we know to cost more than the maximum rebate amounts allow, even where you're up to 100%. And so this program may, even at the full 100%, still present some barriers to certain low-income households. And I think starting and coming in at that 50-50 made me feel comfortable in terms of our ability to implement. I will mention too, this isn't particular only to this item, but in general, we do have the ability to come back and modify any of these decisions with DOE. Not that that is ideal, because what we're talking about is consistency and predictability and those types of things. But just as we're talking about our ability to implement, it is nice to know that we do have also a backstop in terms of saying increasing budget allocations and that kind of thing based on how the program is performing. But I'll leave it at that. I was initially at Alt 1 on this one and looking forward to hearing what my colleagues thought.
Thank you. So initially, I was at Alt 2, Sub-Alt A for this one. I really took to heart the comment that we received regarding how this program does represent an unprecedented opportunity to dedicate rebate funding to a population that faces disproportionate barriers to participation in our energy efficiency programs. But I also am flexible on this one. I think the point that Commissioner Nieto made regarding the fact that the HERE program specifically is dedicated to 150% AMI and below. So there's a very bright line there in terms of eligibility based on income. Would help me be comfortable with a 50-50 split here. And I think the points that you raised regarding just existing issues for those, for those households to take advantage of some of these things at that full percentage or at a higher percentage could increase, could lead to some administrative burdens that we don't want to kind of leave money on the table if we don't have to. I also appreciate your comment on the fact that we can come back, even though it's not ideal. All these things aren't set in stone. And I think, we always talk about how our agency is a continuous improvement agency. And so I think we would all be the first to admit if something isn't going as intended, especially if that means that we can open it up and have it be more readily available or widely distributed. So that, in general, gives me comfort just about not hamstringing ourselves as it relates to some of these decisions forever. So, in summary, I would be okay at the 50% or the 49.9, like you said, which is alternative one for this one. But I also had some room for flexibility to get to Alt 2 sub Alt A. And I think the only other thing I'll add is that we had a lot of fantastic commenter engagement and support, especially as it relates to Alt 2 sub A, so that I was compelled by that in the record as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just agreeing with where Chair Strand ended there, I was at Alt 2 sub A, and I think if we're going to use flexibility, we should use it later to expand to the upper income band and kind of default to the lower income upfront. And if we're not reaching those households and those barriers to entry are real and the implementation, we find that, then we can use that flexibility later. But I think I would try to prefer upfront, greater deployment to the lower income threshold and then adjust as needed. So that was my preference, again, informed by the comments in the record on that. And so I was at Alt 2 sub A. And I think for this program, I don't see that being too much of a confusing or implementation challenge. I think it just literally defines when the bucket of funds is up. And so that shouldn't really cause confusion because it's either there or not. And so that was another reason why I was at Alt 2 sub A on this one.
Thank you both. For all the reasons you both stated, I can join you both there as well, and I think it aligns with where we're at on the other program, and that creates some consistency too, and in terms of our budget management. But to Commissioner Hawkins' point too, this is more budget management. It's not customer-facing experience kind of streamlining in terms of an issue here either. And I had thought some of those similar thoughts as well about trying to be a little bit more, err a little bit more on the side of targeting the highest barrier customers first, seeing where we get with that, and we can always course correct if need truly be, but why not set some of those targets? I will join you both at Alt 2 sub A for the low income budget allocation. The next issue that we have in front of us is Home's retroactive rebates approach. The DOE outlined the guidelines around allowing retroactive rebates within this program. Commission staff added to that list of requirements a couple of additional proposed state requirements. I was fine with both of those, and I was at alternative 1. Chair Strand?
Thank you. I was at alternative 1 on this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alt 1 for me.
Thank you. And our next item is disadvantaged community definition. I was at Alt 1 using the DOE's definition of a disadvantaged community.
I was at alternative 1 on this one as well. Thank you.
Alternative 1.
Thank you. The next item that we have is customer utility data access. We are required to have a data access plan by DOE here, and our staff team, Aptum, and others have worked quite a bit, and we got quite a bit of good analysis in the memo and comment regarding data access. I will say this issue intersects with a couple of potential areas of law and administrative code. I will say I'm at an alternative 3 here because I thought some of the discussion around waivers, to me, may be moot. Because we essentially have, in Chapter 196 of the statutes, we have statutes on municipal customer information sharing and when that information can be shared and when it can't. And there are exceptions about limiting the sharing of that customer information, and one of the exceptions is when you have the customer's consent. And then the same when you're in Chapter 113, looking at our electric service rules, we have some customer information requirements, and we're also, utilities are allowed to share information with customer consent. So I saw the information sharing in this program that is happening going into 2 buckets. Number 1, a customer opts in to join the program. They want to participate. They consent to have their information shared. As discussed in our materials, no waiver is needed for that because utilities are allowed to share consenting customer information. And then bucket 2 of information sharing I saw was program partners, whether they're contractors, commission staff, et cetera, might need to request from the utilities data sets to help targeting and outreach. And those data sets are likely to come in the form of aggregated customer data or customer data that wouldn't allow someone to identify an individual customer specifically by their identity. That type of data set also doesn't require a waiver under the law. It would require a waiver if what program partners are asking for is a large data set that has, that identifies customers individually. My understanding is that that's not what is needed at this time to administer the program, and that it's more the aggregated data sets or the individual customer data sets. So instead of issuing a waiver for something that I don't know that I have sufficient evidence here to say this is a need and it is something that a waiver is needed for because it's in conflict with some sort of code requirement, I would rather just issue an order point in this case, requiring utilities to share with program contractors, of course, individual customer data with the customer's consent, and aggregated data sets, even if consent hasn't been given, as long as those data sets don't include individually identifying customer data. And if we get to a point in the program where, say, for some specific targeted outreach or for some specific evaluation, we need customer identifying bulk data sets and need to look at some sort of waiver or there's some sort of potential conflict, I think we can look at that point and cross that bridge and have staff bring that up. But I'm not seeing here specifically that need. So I do understand the concern. Staff and other parties want to be able to access the data that they need from utilities to be able to implement this program. 100% that has to happen, which is why I would include an order point just underlying, please, we need to get the data in an expedient manner to those who need it, and no, it is not against the law to provide it.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that thank you. I really appreciate your work on developing this alternative 3. I think it's very thoughtful and considerate. My overarching guiding principle on this decision item was transparency and data sharing. So anything that we could do to get there, I think, is super important. I think your alternative 3 is a cleaner and probably faster way to ensure that, and a very direct way to ensure that we want this information available and we want it shared with the appropriate parties. And I appreciate also the analysis that you did regarding whether waivers are actually required, and just, digging into the statutes and the code on that one. So I absolutely can join you at alternative 3. And again, thank you for putting this one out there for our consideration, because I think it's a really good option.
Thank you, Chair Strand. Commissioner Hawkins?
So, yeah, I was really excited to see this as a requirement from the DOE as a means to increase access to data. I know in Focus there is that capability already, but I know there's also parts of the state that do not participate in Focus, and so I'm unclear whether or not there isn't still progress to be made through Alternative 1, and so that's why I was interested in the waiver, and just to be safe and cover everything, and there's still agreements and protections that are put in place, you know, with the administrator and all of that, and so I was at 1 sub A and thought that was the clearest way. So if you could speak more, Commissioner Nieto, to your understanding of accessibility to some of those parts of the state that might not already have data sharing in place. I was thinking this was a clean way to make sure everyone is swept up in the capability, and because these programs are outside of our usual administered programs in some parts of the state and some customers. So that's why I was at 1 sub A, to just make sure everything was captured. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner Huckins. That's a really good point and a good question. I think kind of to break it down to the level that you're breaking it down at, yes, so say, for instance, there is a municipal utility that is regulated by the PSC, so it's subject to Chapter 196, and it's subject to Chapter 113, but it doesn't currently participate in Focus. To me, I think participating in Focus or not participating in Focus the waiver doesn't help create that engagement and that pathway to data sharing. Like, I think the next alternative under some of the data sharing agreements, and I also think including an explicit requirement saying you have to share data with this program, I think that gets there. But I think, say there is let's just say a municipal utility not participating in Focus, they still are subject to the same admin code requirements about, and statutory requirements about what type of customer data they're allowed to share and what they're not. And I believe that all of the types of data so far that the program are requesting, they're already allowed to be shared. So I think like what might be needed in the scenario you're identifying, which is a scenario of concern in terms of implementation and planning that we have to address, would be more the ability to communicate with the utility and explain that this isn't contrary to code requirements, this types of data for you to provide, and here's why, and here's the requirement that you provide it, and then here's kind of the process and pathway we've created. But those utilities aren't additionally precluded from providing individual customer data where consent has been given, or from providing data sets. Does that help?
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to say no, basically, because utilities are very protective of customer data, and I'm worried about customers that want to participate that run into barriers and not having that be available. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So if you're confident on that one, I can join you there. I was just, I guess, less familiar and trying to take what I determined to be the safe approach, but.
I think you're exactly right on track. It's about what do we need to do to make sure that all of the utilities are providing the data and will provide it and to require it. And I think the waiver of the admin code doesn't, and of the statute, let's say the waiver of 113, that doesn't create a requirement for the utility to provide it. And it waives a requirement that I don't think is necessarily applicable in this case. And I think what is going to require the utility to provide it is two things. Number one, utilities have to provide information to the commission and the commission staff upon request under other requirements, but more so than that specific to this program because it is a new program and we have a lot of program partners and contractors working on it. I think it's the addition of that order point, just making it 100% clear that we are establishing here today a requirement to work with the program partners and provide that data. And that's the exact concern and objective that I have as well. And I do believe this covers it.
I think we all want the same thing, it's just how we get there, right? So, no pressure legal, but to Commissioner Nito's point about the order point, I think if we are explicit and we are clear and we are direct about what we're requiring as it relates to this, I think that's going to send the message that I think we all want sent regarding allowing access to the data, not just individual, but also these sets, like you said. And then also, just like sharing components and what happens after that. The second thing that gives me comfort regarding this alternative is that if in practice we do start to hit some of those barriers that we're worried about and feel that a waiver is necessary or applicable, I think, again, we have that built-in flexibility to come back and do that and send a different message, but also a clear message about the fact that our intent is that this information is available, and if it takes a waiver to do that, then here we are.
I'm comfortable with that.
I am as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is along similar lines. It's on the data sharing agreements, and here I was at Alt 1, requiring establishing data sharing agreements with utilities prior to obtaining their customer data. I think that's good IT information hygiene, and it should definitely be a component of our program. Chair Strand?
I was at Alt 1 on this one as well, so yes, Alt 1.
Same for me.
Great, thank you. Next, we have income verification methodology. We initially had some broader choices about how to do income verification in this program. So direct verification of the customer's income using documentation of their household income. We can verify income using a categorical eligibility, meaning if you are already enrolled in a low-income program that is recognized, you're also able to be enrolled in this one as income qualified because we know you've provided documentation in that other program. And then there was an option to have customers or program participants essentially self-verify or self-identify. I understand that DOE has recently changed its guidance and has essentially eliminated most of the self-identify, self-verify option. I wasn't there regardless. I was at Alternative 1, allowing the income verification with documentation or with categorical eligibility. Chair Strand?
Thank you. I was at Alternative 1 on this one as well.
Alternative 1 for me, too.
Great, thank you. And then before we go to the final approvals here, just circling back to those items we had put a pin in. I think the first one here is looking at homes program rebate amounts for households earning more than 150%. I think pursuant to our earlier discussion, I'd like to join you both where you were at, which I believe was Alt 2 Sub A for this one.
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
Correct for me as well.
Great. And then to verify, would that place you both at, under Homes Program Income Eligibility at Alt 2 Take No Action? And that was, if I'm recalling that point in our discussion, we were deciding that we wouldn't eliminate households earning more than 150% of AMI from the first tranche of the program. We would open it all up right away because we were decreasing the budget amounts and increasing the reserved allocations. If
That's what I'm fine with that, with the new restrictions on the total pieces of the pie and then the lower rebate amounts for the higher income thresholds as well.
Yep.
Yes, thank you for the
Thank you.
reminder.
No, thank you.
My notes were not as
Reading all
clear.
my notes again. Yes. Yep.
No, thank you both. And then we had agreed to increase the low-income budget allocations under both programs to that 60% level across the board.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I think we're ready to get to the approval of the packages. I'd be at Alt 1, approving the applications for these programs with the modifications that we've discussed.
Alt 1, thank you.
Thank you.
Alt 1, too.
Thank you. And then in terms of curing and supplemental, I'd be at Alt 2, delegating to the DCIA Division Administrator the authority to keep working with OEI and with DOE on finalizing this application package.
On this one, I think it's just important to note that anytime we delegate something, it does not mean that it can't come back to the commission. And we have excellent administrators and delegated commissioners who are very careful to not only notify us of those things, but to elevate any questions that they want our input on. I was actually at Alternative 1, evidenced by your leading of this discussion today. I think that I'm more than comfortable having it kind of stay at that delegated commissioner level. But if you are comfortable as the delegated commissioner to put that delegation authority with the DCIA Division Administrator, I can absolutely join you there. So I'm fine with Alt 2.
Thank you.
And I am fine for the reasons provided by Chair Strand as well.
Thank you. Great. Are we ready for a motion?
Do you have what you need to?
I think so.
Okay, awesome, wonderful.
Okay, thank you. I move that we approve the IRA home energy rebate applications today, consistent with our discussion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Commissioner Nato. Okay. That brings us to agenda item 14, which is our final agenda item of the day. This is docket 4220 CE 185, the application of Northern States Power Company for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to repower the Wheaton Generating Station in Chippewa County, Wisconsin. We will begin our discussion in open session, but as the agenda states, this case does contain confidential information, and we may go into closed session under Wisconsin statute, section 19.85 sub 1 sub A, to facilitate the deliberation of the case if necessary. At that time, only commissioners and PSC staff who are covered under the NDA and CEII clearance may stay, and we would reconvene then the open meeting pursuant to Wisconsin statute, section 19.85 sub 2, after closed session is done. So we are now going to move to our discussion of 4220 CE 185. Before us today is the application of Northern States Power Company, Wisconsin, for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to repower the Wheaton Generating Station. NSPW is seeking a CPCN to replace the dispatchable capacity provided by the existing 247 megawatt Wheaton generating plant and to construct a new 255 megawatt plant consisting of a 210 megawatt combustion turbine and 5 9 megawatt reciprocating internal combustion engines, or RICE, generator units on the same property where the Wheaton plant currently operates. The applicant maintains that repowering the existing aging plant will result in a 10 times reduction in turbine emission rates and a 20 to 30% improvement in efficiency over the retiring equipment. All units will be capable of being upgraded in the future to burn a carbon-free fuel like hydrogen. By constructing the project at this brownfield site, NSPW will avoid building new gas and transmission lines. NSPW can also reuse its existing interconnection rights without going through the MISO generation interconnection queue, and the proposed location is less expensive than the alternative site. The project is identified to fulfill two important needs: to maintain system reliability and enhance system resiliency as the NSP system transitions from fossil fuel generation to carbon-free generation resources, and 2, to fulfill dispatchable capacity requirements for the NSP system. The project is estimated to cost $318 million, inclusive of AFUDC, or allowance for funds used during construction, and it is estimated that the net impact of the project to NSPW's average residential customer would be less than $1 per month. In addition to the applicant, the Citizens Utility Board and Clean Wisconsin intervened in this proceeding, and numerous public comments were filed and received. I found the record to be complete and found that the record clearly demonstrates the need to repower the Wheaton Generating Station, and I do support this project. I believe this case gets to the very core of the Commission's mission, which is to ensure the delivery of safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible utility services. While I understand that those in opposition to this project have expressed concerns regarding the non-renewable nature of the project, I just want to put out a friendly reminder that the Commission does have a history of supporting renewable energy development in Wisconsin, and the PSC has been very active and productive in the review and approval of renewable energy projects. In fact, since 2019, the Commission has approved 4,176 megawatts of new solar projects alone. And I'll also note that the record outlines why those renewable resources would not fulfill the specific capabilities that the Wheaton Repower project is intended to provide here. I want to thank the applicant, Commission staff, the intervening parties, and members of the public for their participation in this docket. A lot of complex work and analysis is needed in these types of cases, and that was absolutely provided in this case. I also want to note that Commissioner Nieto is recused from this docket, so I will now turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Hawkins, for any opening remarks that he would like to make.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I agree with your remarks on the completeness of the record and really appreciate the comments that were received both from the public and from the interveners and their experts. I thought the back and forth with the Commission staff and the interveners was particularly helpful to me. And I will be joining you in support of this application. Just want to get that out of the way at the front end. And based on what was in the record and something that, came top of mind for me, recent NERC reports on the capacity crunch that the region is facing, including the NSP system, really highlight that not only is this project needed for reliability reasons and all of the specific qualities that it offers in that regard, but as an enabler of additional renewable energy and retirement of baseload resources as reviewed through the Minnesota IRP. And so this project was a key piece of that. And so to enable the largest portion of that IRP, which is renewable energy, projects like these are required to keep the grid reliable. And so that's just a bit of my background thinking on this project. And I do have some comments for later on the analysis that went into the alternatives, and I'll raise those when we get to issue 2, but that's my opening remarks.
Think you for those. This is a great example of the expertise, among other issues, that you bring to the Commission, and we're really excited to have your perspective on those things. So thank you for those thoughtful comments. Okay, so our plan will be to walk through the issues outlined in the decision matrix. In total, there are 15 issues. Issue 14 is uncontested, so my comments will be directed towards the remaining contested issues. This is not us going into closed session. I'm going to make a motion for a brief recess, just because we have a couple other things we need to attend to this morning. And then if I get a second and an affirmative vote, we would take a brief recess, and then we would reconvene in open session again and continue our discussion of the 14 contested items within this decision matrix. So I move that we take a brief recess.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're going to take a brief recess. Thank you. Welcome back. I'm going to make a motion that we come back in open session for our meeting. So I move that we reconvene.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So just as a super quick reminder, we are now going to start walking through our decision items in docket 4220 CE 185, the repowering of the Wheaton facility on behalf of the Northern States Power Company of Wisconsin. Again, just for those who are following along, Commissioner Nieto is recused from this, so Commissioner Hawkins and I will begin our discussion with item 1. And thank you for bearing with us during our break. Issue 1 asks us if the proposed project, if constructed, satisfies the reasonable needs of the public for an adequate supply of electric energy, which is as required for our approval under Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491, sub 3, sub D 2. So as I outlined in my opening comments, I did find the record demonstrates that the proposed project satisfies the reasonable public need for an adequate supply of electric energy. In addition to filling a future capacity need, the record further demonstrates that the project represents an efficient replacement of the existing 247 megawatt units at the Wheaton Generating Plant, which are planned to retire in 2025. While the interveners both contested the needs for this project, the substantial evidence in the docket demonstrates that this project is necessary and that there are no feasible alternatives to meet the unique reliability and resiliency issues that this project will address. The modeling performed by the applicant suggests that the proposed project is less costly on a present value revenue requirement basis than extending the operation of the current Wheaton units until 2030. Therefore, I am at alternative 1 for this item, and we'll turn it over to Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I am on alternative 1 on this item as well. When looking at the reliability needs in aggregate with the capacity needs, I find that this project is indeed in the public interest and was supported all throughout the record in a variety of ways. And again, as I said in my opening remarks, I find that projects such as this one are a key enabler of additional renewable energy, and we'll discuss that further throughout the other items. So I'm at alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 2 asks if the proposed project is in the public interest, considering alternative sources of supply, alternative locations, individual hardships, engineering, economic, safety, reliability, and environmental factors pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491, sub 3, sub D 3. I found that the record clearly demonstrates that there are no reasonable alternative sources of supply that are technically capable of providing the required attributes of the proposed project at a reasonable cost. The interveners allege that the proposed project is not in the public interest, as more cost-effective alternatives to the project should be explored further to satisfy the statutory public interest requirements for this project. But, as stated, the substantial evidence in this docket demonstrates that no reasonable, cost-effective alternatives to the project, that would be alternatives that are capable of mitigating the reliability and resiliency needs demonstrated in the docket, exist. Therefore, I do believe this project is in the public interest considering these factors, and I am at alternative 1.
I am at alternative 1 on this item as well. I believe there has been sufficient analysis of the alternatives, and it demonstrates that this project meets the combined reliability and capacity needs that the project was identified to meet. I also note that this project is in the public interest when considering alternative supply and location because it utilizes the existing grid interconnections and existing natural gas infrastructure, which I think is clearly a benefit of this project. And so that makes it unique, and it's a repowering. And so I think utilizing those assets that have already been paid for by customers is clearly in the public interest to maintain use of them. I did find that for the unique reliability and resilience needs that this project identifies, that there could be some improvements going forward in how to consider alternatives, especially with newer technologies. I found some gaps there. There wasn't sufficient gaps to change my mind on this one because the costs of the alternatives were so widely different, that I'm not in a different place because of that. But I've talked with staff about that, and for future consideration of batteries, for example, I've found some improvements that could be made. And so I would look for that in future projects to have better apples-to-apples comparison for alternatives. So, and yeah, like I said, that doesn't impact where I'm at on this one. I'm at alternative 1.
Great, thank you very much for those comments. Issue 3 asks if the proposed project has an undue adverse impact on other environmental values as provided under Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D4. In large part because this project will be located on an existing generation site, as Commissioner Hawkins just mentioned, there are no anticipated adverse impacts, and to the degree that there are potential impacts, I feel the record demonstrates that those impacts can be avoided or mitigated through the use of proposed action plans and proposed order conditions, which we will be taking up later as we proceed through our decision matrix. So I am at alternative 1 on this issue as well.
As am I, alternative 1.
Thank you. Moving on to our next issue. Let me just make sure I have the right items in front of us. So issue 4, asks if the proposed project will substantially impair the efficiency of utility service, provide facilities unreasonably in excess of probable future requirements, or add to the cost of service without proportionately increasing the value or available quantity of service. Here, the record demonstrates that the proposed project will meet the reliability and capacity needs, and that no reasonable alternatives capable of fulfilling these stated needs have been identified. The proposed project would be constructed on an existing brownfield site and would reuse the existing interconnection rights. The project is also cost-effective when compared to the costs of the alternative, which would include keeping the existing facilities in service until 2030. Therefore, I am at alternative 1 for this one.
I am at alternative 1 as well, and I believe in particular the value of this project and the capabilities it provides from a flexibility and reliability standpoint are critical and help to create new value for NSP customers and provide capabilities that the record demonstrated how the grid is transitioning and there's greater variability and many new resources coming on. And so the flexibility of this resource will be a key enabler of those. And I thought the record demonstrated that very well. And yeah, that's it for me on this one.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to issue 5. This asks if the energy priority law options for cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound alternatives to building the proposed project exist. Here, the record firmly establishes that the unique reliability requirements of the project necessitate the proposed project as is, and that the other options identified in the energy priority law are not reasonable alternatives as it relates to this specific application. So therefore, regarding issue 5, I am also at alternative 1.
Same, alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 6 asks if the proposed project would have a material adverse impact on competition in the relevant wholesale electric service market under Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D7. Here I'm at alternative 1. The project will not have a material impact on competition in the wholesale market.
Agreed, alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 7 asks if the proposed project complies with Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D6 and will not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area involved. The record demonstrates that this project would not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area. As noted in the issue scope, the proposed project would replace existing generators which have been in operation at this location for some time. Additionally, and also important, this project is in compliance with the Town of Wheaton and Chippewa County's comprehensive plans. So for all of these reasons, I am at alternative 1.
Same, I'm at alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 8, here the applicant, this has to do with the siting and alternatives. So under issue 8, the applicant provided 2 site alternatives on property that they currently own. The proposed site is located on the Wheaton Generating Station property, and the alternative site is adjacent to the existing site, and it's currently row crop with some wooded areas. As noted by commission staff, there are minor differences between the 2 sites in terms of environmental impacts. And also, I briefly mentioned this in my opening remarks, but the record also demonstrates that the proposed site is less costly than the alternative site. So I didn't see enough compelling evidence in the record that the alternative site is preferable, and therefore I'm at alternative 1, which would be to authorize the applicant's proposed site for this project.
In agreement, I'm at alternative 1. I'll also just note it requires just less physical infrastructure, especially modifications to the existing gas infrastructure. So I'm at alternative 1.
Yes, great point, thank you. Issue 9 asks if the proposed project uses brownfields to the extent practicable. Here, yes, the sites considered are located in previously developed or impacted areas within the existing Wheaton Station footprint, which puts me at alternative 1. The proposed project absolutely uses brownfields to the extent possible.
Yes, I'm in agreement, alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 10 relates to project-specific conditions. Here we consider the requirements the commission could impose to help avoid indirect impacts to wetlands and waterways during construction of this project. Here, the applicant was supportive of each requirement with a clarifying revision to the 4th condition related to the provision of project plans and environmental documents. With the modification offered, NSPW would provide copies of plans and environmental documents to the applicable construction crews and inspectors. This would mean that the relevant plans and documents would go to these responsible for the work and not to every crew member and inspector, regardless of their project responsibilities. I don't have concerns with this proposed modification and thinks it makes sense. I also believe that this level of agreement on these conditions represents a positive approach to address the potential impacts to wetlands and waterways during construction, which would put me at alternative 2, approve the conditions as outlined with the NSPW modification to condition 4.
And I also support the clarification offered by the applicant to condition 4, so I'm at alternative 2.
Thank you. Issue 11 includes 11 and 11A. So as outlined in 11A, Wisconsin statute section 1.11 requires for major actions significantly affecting the quality of the human environment, the preparation of a detailed statement as to the environmental impact of the proposed action. Here, our commission staff did complete an environmental assessment and no objections were raised under this issue. Therefore, I'm at alternative 1.
And I am at alternative 1 as well.
Thank you. For 11B, as outlined in Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D4, it requires that the proposed project will not have an undue adverse impact on other environmental values, such as but not limited to ecological balance, public health and welfare, historic sites, geological formations, the aesthetics of land and water, and recreational use. Because no significant adverse impacts are likely to result from this project, I am at alternative 1 on this issue.
So am I, alternative 1.
Thank you. Issue 12 asks what standard conditions should be attached to the construction of the Wheaton repowering project to meet the requirements of commission approval. Here again, the applicant is in agreement with the conditions as proposed, with the exception of 12L, where the applicant proposed a modification. Although the modification proposed by the applicant may be reasonable, I didn't see enough information in the record to demonstrate what exactly this approach would entail and how that would impact construction plans. Absent that explanation, I don't agree with approving the proposed modification to 12L, but I also here would like to address an additional reporting requirement. So this project is expected to involve approximately 250 construction jobs. And given this, I feel it's reasonable for us to add one additional condition to the reporting requirements listed in 12F. It's important to note that this addition is consistent with prior commission CPCN actions. And so the reporting condition addition that I'm proposing would read as follows. The applicant shall report on a quarterly basis its efforts and the efforts of its contractors to recruit Wisconsin residents to fill employment opportunities created by the construction of the proposed project, its efforts to collaborate with state registered apprenticeship programs, and the actual number of Wisconsin residents and out-of-state workers employed on-site to construct the proposed project. This would put me at a modified alternative 1, which would be to support the standard conditions 12A through 12O as written, and with the inclusion of this addition to 12F requiring employment reporting.
I can join you with that proposal on the modification to 12F, and I agree that I didn't see enough from the applicant to modify the obtaining of the necessary permits and how that would impact the construction timeline. It was unclear to me as well. So I can support your modification.
Thank you. Moving on to issue 13. This issue pertains to a cost overrun condition. Given my construction background, this one was a tough one for me, and I went back and forth several times on my position on this. So we do have the staff's recommendation for cost overrun condition language, and then the applicant proposed an alternative. We do have precedent going back to 2021 for the staff condition proposed language. I do appreciate the applicant's position on this, and I also looked back to review recent commission decisions that did include the language from alternative 2, just to see kind of the types of projects and what the reasoning behind those was. Ultimately, I think requiring the applicant to provide notice of cost overruns should not negatively impact the project. I do think it's important to be consistent on this condition when possible. So one of the reasons that I kind of went back and forth is that the unique nature of this project, in my opinion, could set it apart, but ultimately, I am supportive of the modified language outlined in alternative 2. I think it demonstrates the commission's interest in ensuring cost prudency as well as the timely reporting of any overruns that may occur. So for this issue, I am at alternative 2. So condition 13 is modified by the commission to include alternative wording would be necessary for approval of the proposed project.
First of all, thank you for those additional comments. That was helpful to me as well. And I'm at alternative 2, and I think just demonstrated by the fact that this application has already had one cost increase since it was received by the commission. I think it's important to have this condition in there, so I'll join you at alternative 2.
Okay, thank you. Issue 14 is uncontested, so as I mentioned, we don't need to discuss that one, which brings us to issue 15. Should the commission grant a CPCN for the proposed project? Consistent with my decision in issues 1 through 14, I am at alternative 2 that we should grant the CPCN for the proposed project with the conditions outlined in our discussion.
And I am at alternative 2 as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if you're ready, Commissioner Hawkins, I think we will take a motion, but no rush. Got a lot going on.
First time.
Yes.
I move, let me find my language for this. I move that we approve the application of NSPW for a CPCN for the proposed project consistent with our discussion, and delegate the drafting of the final decision to staff, and that the draft be returned to the commission for final approval.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I was going to say the same thing. So I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you have what you need?
Oh.
Yeah, and Commissioner Nieto is abstaining. So those abstaining,
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have what you need regarding
Yes.
coming back to the commission? Okay, wonderful. So that concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. And all I need now is a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn until Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.